This is our guest speaker, Nakita Pope. As she refers to herself as the Chief Chick.
That's right.
She is running her own business, which is it's in the focus of branding. Her clients definitely use her for her branding capabilities in not only the person branding, but also the business branding. Very, very effective for entrepreneurs getting their business started and the awareness factor that makes them very successful. Clients all across the country. She's well sought after to the point where she's actually selecting assignments, right? So she's very good. And I don't want to take a lot of her thunder, nor I want to take a lot of time. I'm going to leave the rest up to her because, trust me, you're going to have a very good session tonight. Participate when it's necessary. It's going to be to your growth and to your benefit, okay? And then we got some cool things to hand out.
Yeah.
So the Chief Chick, it's nice to say that legally without getting in trouble. Isn't it something?
Gotta
Chief
take the
Chick,
word back.
Nakita Pope.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Hello. How's everybody this evening? Yeah. Can you hear me in the rafters? Yeah. Okay, good. As John said, I am Nakita Pope. I am a brand strategist and chief chick at Branding Chicks. Just a little bit about my background so that you know where I came from. I started as a graphic designer. Always been an artist, love the creative side of things, but very much into the strategy of graphic design. And then I went to a portfolio school after undergrad and decided to focus more on advertising and marketing, also on the creative side. So I've always been interested in the strategic part of it, and now I've parlayed that and my love of working with entrepreneurs and working with women into Branding Chicks. So she's about 4 years old, almost 5, and I work with a variety of clients. My niche is women-owned businesses and brands for women, but I have clients that are outside that realm as well. So let's get started. If I asked you what a brand is, what would you say? Shout them out. Image.
Something that defines.
Something that defines. What else?
Represents.
Represents you.
Recognizable.
Recognizable. One more.
Whatever you want it to be.
Whatever you want it to be. That's a great one. All of those things are appropriate. So your brand is basically the thing that people say about you when you are not in the room, right? So think about every single decision that you make, everything that you do is part of your brand, whether you realize it or not. So it's not just the things that you craft, which is where that part about it can be whatever you want it to be, but it's also the things that you don't think is part of your brand, but absolutely is. And that's more of an issue when you're talking about personal branding versus business branding, but it's still all very much in the same realm. One of my favorite analogies is that branding is very much like dating, right? So you see somebody from across the room and you're like, they look cute. I want to see what they're talking about. So you go talk to them, and then that begins your foray into their brand. You have no idea what you're going to get out of that conversation. The next step, you go into that first date, you go into date 3, you decide whether you want to ride off into the sunset with them, or if you want to just say, I don't think I want to be with you anymore. So branding is very much like that. So every time you have an interaction with a client or with a peer, it's all part of your brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. And this is very important by David Breer. This quote basically talks about how if you don't define your brand for yourself, then someone else will. And you see that all over the place, right? So how many times have you heard a business portray themselves to be a very specific thing, but your relationship with that brand is very different than what they say, right? So if they say that customer service is our number one thing, and then your interactions with them are all horrible customer service, then guess what? To you, that's what their brand is. It doesn't matter what they say their brand is. If they can't back it up, then you're lost and it doesn't really match up. So when you talk about things being on brand, that's where that comes into play. So today, we're talking a little bit about personal branding. So If you're more interested in business branding, then apply some of these same things and map that onto business branding, because it's all kind of the same. And if you're an entrepreneur, which I hear some of you are or are interested in being, then sometimes they're very much the same. They're very synonymous. For me, I'm a solopreneur. So when I'm in front of someone, I am branding chicks. There isn't anyone else that they look at and say, that's branding chicks. So I am Nakita Pope as a brand, but I'm also branding chicks as a brand. So those things kind of cross over when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're just starting out. So why do you think you need a personal brand? What can it give you? Someone? Anyone?
Who is your reputation?
Your reputation, exactly. What else?
And it draws attention to what you're trying to portray.
Yes, absolutely.
It separates you from everyone else.
It does separate you from everyone else. So that personal brand is exactly why you need to take the time to craft it and make sure that you are focusing it in exactly the way you want it to be focused, right? So part of that personal branding is, how do I match up to my competitors, right? So there may be other businesses or other people that are just like me that may have the same credentials that I have. They have the same education that I have. How do I make myself different? And branding is a big part of that. So especially when you're in school like this and you're just getting ready to get out and you're looking at trying to find a job, what you present to people is your brand. So how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else that graduated at the exact same time that you did and make sure that you are a little bit different than they are? And that's a lot of different touch points, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So here's some of the things that you can look at gaining from a strong personal brand. So when you're talking about respect, someone else said image, that's very similar, right? So you want people to respect you for your knowledge, for your skill set, for the way that you handle situations. All of that is part of your brand. You want to get ideal clients, or in your case, some of you, the ideal position, the ideal job, greater credibility. So even if you're just coming out of school, sometimes the issue is, I don't really have any experience. So how do I let people know that I have what it takes to do this job, even though I can't point to a position that I've had that's just like that? So that's where credibility comes into play. You can craft that brand in such a way that they believe that you can do it just as much as you do, even though on paper it may not necessarily look like you have the credentials to do that. Leadership opportunities. Being a leader in your industry, being a leader in your company, even being a leader at school is really a big deal, because that is one of the ways that you separate yourself from everyone else. And then those rewarding partnerships. So whether you realize it or not, every single person that's in this room is automatically a partner of yours. They're your colleague. Whether you've talked to them before or not, these people, some of them will be the ones that you go to later to talk to about doing business with them or getting a job or hiring them. So all of those relationships really matter. I have people that I still talk to from high school. One of my biggest clients is one of my best friends from high school. She has a company in Arizona. I have a company here. We often partner up and work together with our clients. She does work for me. I do work for her. That is a relationship that has continued to grow as we've grown. So you never know what those relationships are going to look like later on down the line. So what are the building blocks of your brand? If you had to say right now that you're working on building your brand, what would it include? Website?
Business cards.
Business cards. What else?
Plan.
I'm sorry?
A plan.
A plan, absolutely. Like a plan for goals, like what you want to do next?
Like, yes.
Got it. What else?
Your business.
Hmm?
The name of your business.
The name of your business?
Your vision and your mission.
Your vision and your mission?
Filing.
Filing? Say more about that.
Like if you're creating an LLC.
Yes.
you would say,
Definitely, definitely. So when you think about those building blocks for your brand, one of the things I liked about what you guys said is that it crosses different areas. So often when people hear branding, they think that that means a logo or a business card only. It's not just that, it's also messaging. I work with strategy with my clients. I work with their copywriting, because it doesn't matter if you have that vision or you have that mission and you can't really articulate it in such a way that your target market is intrigued by it, right? So all of that is part of your brand. It's how you speak about it. It's how you operate once you have that client or once you're in that position. All of those things matter. So those building blocks there's some foundational ones, but then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it spreads out depending on how much experience you have and where you are in your career. All of those things matter. So those building blocks just continue to grow. And if you look at every opportunity as a building block, then you'll realize how many more things that can go into your brand. How many people have Googled themselves recently? Yes. So
That's how you know what you're doing.
exactly. So if you have not Googled yourself recently, I suggest you do it. If you have no idea what your brand is, Google yourself and see what comes up. I Google myself about once every 3 or 4 months. For the longest time, there was not another Nakita Pope. Then there was another Nakita Pope, and she was a track star in Texas. Sure,
There you go.
that's good.
Go take that.
Great. Then Nakita Pope in Texas got arrested. Yeah. So now I go by Nakita M. Pope. Because I need people to know that I am not her. Yeah.
In Georgia, you can pay to have those records yanked.
Yeah, you can.
Can you not do that in Texas?
I'm not sure. She may not know that. She's considerably younger than I am, so I don't know if someone told her that or not.
I had to do that. There's someone who got arrested in Fulton County with my name.
Oh, really?
As long as you've got the money,
Mhm.
because the people that post those records are like really third-party sites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should
And you can get it taken off.
Yeah, you can contact them and pay for it.
Well, what I did was I made it my business that every single other thing that I did always had my middle initial involved and had all these other things that connected back to my person, or my particular image, and not hers. So anything dealing with branding or entrepreneurship or me being a professor, any of those things are all now there. So over the last couple of years, well, over the last 5 years or so, now I'm at a place where everything that comes up first is all me. So stop getting arrested. So let's talk about some of those building blocks. One of them, there are 3 main categories that you should be focused on, especially starting out. One is your online presence, which goes directly into that Googling yourself. The second one is your other presence, like how you are in person, and your leave behinds. And those are more collateral type of things. Those are the things that you leave with people when you meet them, or if you go in for a job interview and you leave them with your resume, that's a leave behind. So there are several different things that come under that umbrella. So let's talk about presence first. One is a signature style, and that means different things for different people. One, you want to make sure that you're always dressed appropriately for whatever the situation is, but then, you add those touches, you add those flares that have people remember you. I have a student whose hair is bright blue. Nobody's ever going to forget her. Not ever. But that's her signature thing. Like, that's what she rolls with, so it works. It may be that you wear bow ties. It may mean that you always have on interesting shoes. It may mean that you have interesting jewelry, or you have a pop of color no matter what it is that you have on. That signature style can be anything, but it should be specific to you. The second one is communication. It's how you talk to people. It's not just how you say things, but also what you say. When you talk about business branding, your brand voice is extremely important, right? So your brand voice isn't actually the content of what you say. Your brand voice is actually how you say it. So there are some brands that are very straightforward. They may be educational. There are other brands who are very quirky and funny, and they want to approach you that way. So you have to figure out for yourself, what is your brand voice? As Branding Chicks, I've decided her voice is very sassy and she's fun. So Branding Chicks should always be that. Let's talk about leadership. So that's also a big part of your presence. Whether you take leadership, they say that no one gives you leadership, you take leadership. So whether you step up and decide that you're going to lead something or be the main focus for a particular situation is one thing, but it's also how you lead once you have that opportunity. So are you a dictator? Are you someone that wants to see everyone else succeed? How do you approach everything that it is that you do? The last one is, well, the last two kind of go together. Personality is one, so that goes a little bit into brand voice. We've all had people who that are really, really good at what they do, but you just don't like them very much, right? And those are the people that nobody wants to work with. If I get an opportunity to work with a client and I can tell they're going to be difficult, I charge them more. I just do. And I don't feel bad about that because I know that I need it to make sure that the money that I get from them is going to be worth all this extra stress that they're going to give me. Relationships. Those are also important. We talked about that a little bit before in terms of your colleagues and the people that are around you. And those relationships come with the people that you work with, not only that, but your clients. I've gotten to know my clients very well. Some of them have turned into friendships from business relationships because we had such a great time working together. And I choose to work with people who I have something in common with, or we have a common goal that we can learn from each other, and all of those things are important. And not burning any of those bridges. I think people forget about that. It's great to make a lot of contacts. It's great to do a lot of networking, but how do you continue that relationship? You don't just call them when you want something, right? You make sure that you continue that relationship. Goes back to branding is like dating, right? So if that person only calls you when they want to go out and they don't call you any other time, or they call you when they want something from you, then you're not going to answer their calls very much. So keeping that relationship alive is extremely important. So for me, that looks like I saw an article that made me think about somebody else that I met last week, and so I sent it to him. Like, I saw this and I thought about you. Or this thing is going on, I don't know if you know about it, but it's directly related to your business and I thought it might help you. That took me 5 minutes, but they won't forget who I am, right? All right. So your online presence, we talked about that. Your website is one of them. Somebody mentioned that. What do you feel like? So under this category for online presence, the way that I look at it is these are the things that work for you when you're not working for yourself, right? Anybody can go to your website at any time. They can go to your blog at any time. It doesn't have to be business hours. You don't have to answer the phone. They're researching you. They're checking you out even when you have no idea what's going on. Somebody told me earlier that they went to my website and downloaded my resume, and they know all kinds of stuff about me. I didn't know that. So these are the things that are working for you when you're not working for yourself. And that's fantastic because it means that you don't have to be managing that in terms of real time. But on the other hand, it means that these things are extremely important because they don't have anything else to look at that moment besides those things. So if you don't present yourself well there, then they're going to assume that that's who you are. They're going to assume that that's your brand. Does that make sense? So one of the ways that I look at these elements is that you're on a wheel, right? So on that wheel, let's say you've got your website, your business card, your personal style, your relationships, right? You have no idea where someone's going to enter into that cycle. So if they come in through your website, it needs to be consistent. If they come in through, you meet them at a networking event, it needs to be consistent when they go to your website. So you have no idea where they're going to enter that cycle. So you have to make sure that it all lines up and it all represents you exactly the way you want to be represented in their singular form, but also together. Social media also, I know that probably your career services people have been talking to you about that if you're looking for jobs. These days, they look at your social media just as much as they look at your resume. So if you got some questionable things out there, you might start wanting to take them down. Content marketing is another one. So if you have a blog or if you write articles that are being posted in different places, whether they're personally driven or if they're about your industry or whatever it is, those things all will come up if your name is attached to them. So it's really important. So the leave behinds that we talked about before, those are 4 different things that I think are your cornerstones for that, especially at this stage where you are. So your resume is one of them. When it comes to your resume, branded resumes are really big right now. It took a while for general corporate entities to realize that a branded resume is better than everybody having the same Word document template resume. So now they're looking for something that has your personality in it. They want to know that it speaks for you. So it still needs to be clean. It still needs to say all of the things you need it to say about your skill set and your education, but how can you add some of yourself into it? What things do you do outside of school? What things are you interested in? Make sure that all of those things are kind of wrapped up in there because they're looking for a complete package, a well-balanced person. So if you can present that to them on one sheet of paper, then you've got them. Second one is a well-written bio. That one, people tend to falter on simply because they try to write it themselves. I don't care if you're a great writer, you know everything about yourself, you should not write your own bio. Mainly because it's hard for you to distill however many years of everything down into one paragraph. It's just extremely difficult. And the other thing is that people's impression of you, sometimes the things that stand out to other people sometimes is very different than what you think is your strongest skill set. So having someone else write your bio means that they know all the things that you know about yourself, but they're pulling out the things that they know people will respond to. So that's very important. And then a professional headshot. If you've got a LinkedIn profile and you've got a picture of you on the yard with your friend looking crazy, it's probably not going to work. And it doesn't have to be, done by a photographer necessarily. It just has to be clean. You can show some of your personality in it, but it's important that you can see your face well and that it looks like you took some effort to make this happen. And then your business card is another one because that's something else that you leave people with. I can't tell you how many times people throw away business cards. If you don't have one that makes people want to keep it, then you probably need to do something else with it. If it's, this is my designer hat on now. If it's flimsy, they're probably not going to keep it. If it's super glossy and it looks like the same business card that you got at Jiffy Lube when you went there, they're probably not going to keep it. So think about those things. How do you bring yourself into all of those things that you're going to leave with people? Okay, so how do you make it personal? What would be your best guess? How do you bring yourself into it?
Maybe like think of something that describes you,
Mm-hmm.
your brand.
Mm-hmm.
So something stands out, like for example, maybe something small. If your favorite color is purple, then make it purple, or just something that really defines you that you like, so people kind of know a little about you. Make
Yeah.
your card.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that's going to be personal to you, something that you care about. So it could be as small as your favorite color. It could be that you have that there are certain things that you hold dear to your heart, whether you're a family person. Sometimes those are things that you say. It could be simply that there are values that you really hold dear, like you value integrity, you value honesty. Saying those things because it's a buzzword is very different than believing those things in your heart and living your life that way, and that comes across in everything else that you're doing. So making it personal, really, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but the bottom line is that you have everything you need. You already have everything you need to make it personal. So even if you don't have your website or your business card or your professional headshot, you got everything you need right now to make it personal. Every single time you talk to somebody in a class or you interact with one of your professors, that's personal. They get to know who you are. And so every time you lead with that and you back it up with what you can do and how you do it, then you're always going to be on top, right? You're the brand, so it's already personal. So one of the things I want to do right now is, everybody have a piece of paper? Okay, everybody ready? Okay, on your piece of paper, I want you to write down 5 words that you feel describe you best. And if you have to make a choice between who you are now and who you aspire to be, then write down the ones that you aspire to be. If you have to make a choice. They might line up. All right, time's up. Who wants to share?
Got a persistent, employable.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Nice.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Caring.
Fun and caring. All right, what you got?
I chose energetic,
Uh-huh.
adventurous, creative, understanding, and peaceful.
Uh-huh.
I put creative, stole hers. Caring, courageous, courteous, and cool under pressure.
Awesome.
Put strong, loyal, ambitious, intelligent, and boss.
And boss? Nice. How about you over there?
I put visionary, detailed, organized, self-aware, and impactful.
Nice. Somebody in the back. What you got?
Determined, focused, leader, results-oriented, and persuasive.
Persuasive. That's a good one. One more. What you got? Y'all got hands up over there? I'll come back. Okay.
I put hardworking, smart, beautiful, sweet, and funny.
Excellent.
Oh, I put resilient, thankful, funny, loving, and direct.
Awesome. So for the people that shared and for the people who haven't, what are you doing right now that exhibits all of those things? It may not all be one thing, but are there things that you are taking on right now that's going to make you even more of those things that you want to be? Yes?
Yeah.
Excellent. So that's the thing to think about, is that's why I said it depends on whether you're talking about yourself right now or if it's an aspirational thing. If you have some of those words for you are aspirational, you want to be independent, you want to be a boss, and you might not be yet, then what are you doing to get there? How are you building a brand that leads you there? Because it's not going to just all of a sudden appear. Your brand starts now. It actually started a long time ago, but it especially starts now. So those are the things you want to think about. And that is one of the things that can keep you going, because it's not a matter of who someone else wants you to be, it's who you want to be. So what brand do you want to build? What brand do you always want to communicate to people? How do you want people to see you? What do you want them to say about you when you're not in the room, right? So you're always working towards that. And when things get rough and you didn't get the grade you wanted, didn't get the job you wanted, then it's like, okay, so that one didn't work. What am I going to do next that's going to make me independent, resilient, smart, creative? What am I going to do that is going to give me those things, right? Excellent. So let's see. Let's take some questions.
Got one?
Yeah.
I got a business card earlier this week,
Mhm.
and it said, like, I do this
Mhm.
.weebly.com.
Mhm.
How do you view that?
Weebly.
Mm-hmm.
Did everybody hear the question?
No.
Weebly or webs or just anything where it says, like, mybrand.yourbrand.com.
Got it. So his question was, he said that he got a business card earlier this week, and the domain name for that person's website was whatever their domain was, .weebly.com. Some people do Wix, they do all kinds of things. When it comes down to it, building your brand means that you don't want anybody to have to search for you too long. It's kind of like, I don't want anybody to have to fumble and figure out how to pay me. If nothing else, I make sure that it's as easy as pie to pay me. right? So it's the same thing with your website. You want people to find you and find you easily, and that's part of your brand. So every time you have someone else's business attached to your domain name, it waters down your brand. So if you can, even if you do have a Wix website or a Weebly website, the best thing to do is get your domain name and have it forwarded to that. So when they put in brandingchicks.com, it still might go to brandingchicks.weebly, but what they put in was brandingchicks.com, and that's what they're going to remember. Yeah.
Who do you aspire to be, and where did you who do you look for inspiration and
Like in terms of where to go next and all that stuff? There's a few people. One, I look at Martha Stewart. I admire her brand quite a bit simply because she's been able to take the core idea of who she created herself to be, and she's been able to expand that brand in so many different ways. So she's not necessarily, when we talk about brand extensions, for instance, it's either going to be a vertical extension or a horizontal extension. Horizontal means that it expands out this way. It may be in multiple categories. A vertical extension means that it's going to be in the same category, but you're going to do something different. So it's the difference between Hershey's creating a new candy bar, vertical, or Hershey's creating chocolate syrup, horizontal, right? She's been able to do lots of brand extensions that are horizontal. She's in Michaels. She has a line of things in Michaels. She's got the Martha Stewart magazine. She's got home decorating products in Home Depot. Like, she's everywhere. But whenever you see it, you know it's Martha Stewart. It's still very much on brand for her. And it doesn't seem odd. You know, you have to build a bridge for your audience from one place to the next if you're going to do something new. And she's done that flawlessly, I think. So she's one. Marie Forleo is another one. If you're not familiar with her, check her out. She does a TV show. Well, it's a web TV show, but she does lots of interviews and things like that. But what she focuses on is building the business and the life you love. And that balance is extremely important, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And that's important to me. Like, I do what I love, but I also want to have life. Forleo, Marie Forleo.
Nakita, when you get a question, can you repeat the question so we can record it?
Sure can. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I got a lot of good advice from this from someone who is inspired and wants to follow the branding techniques that you showed us.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to brand 5 female singer-songwriters, I dedicated the time and took a huge risk on doing it myself, what advice would you give me to brand? How would I brand myself to these artists? Would I brand myself as an agent or a brand manager for them?
Mm-hmm.
And then would I ask them for a percentage if they had any sales or were successful off the brand that was built?
Okay, that's a really great question. So just to kind of boil it down, so you're branding female singer-songwriters, and you're trying to figure out in terms of how you market yourself to them, whether you're a brand manager or an agent or a manager, right? So the main thing to think about is what is the biggest value that you provide to them, right? So brand management means that for the most part, it means that they already have a brand, and you're trying to make sure that strategically they don't go off brand in any of the decisions that they're making and the things that they're doing. Sometimes brand manager also means you build the brand and then manage it. So you'll have to kind of define that for yourself, which one you want to be. I don't think agent is what you want necessarily, because that goes into promotion. And that kind of thing. A brand strategist or a brand manager is much more strategic. They're not as much in the weeds with, I'm going to try to get you in this show right now, and I've got to call everybody in town to get you in there. And the agent is very much that. So figure out what the biggest value is that you provide and the part that you like to do the most. Because sometimes the value that you provide is not the thing you like, and then you go down that path, and then you're like, I hate this mess. So don't do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Brianna Jones.
Hey, Brianna.
I'm going to introduce myself. It's just My name is Brianna Jones. I'm a junior transfer student here, business management major.
Okay.
And I have a question. Well, of course, I'm standing up. But
You just want us to see your coat, didn't you? Tell the truth.
No, so like, I brand myself as Global Glamour, which is a business about makeup, enhancing beauty inside out. And I also travel. That's why I have the name Global and then Glamour, because I do makeup. And I also do like a whole lot of community service, and I like glamorizing the earth. So it's like those two tie into each other, which I brand a lot. But my question is, I brand Global Glamour a lot, but it's not like trademark, it's not legalized like a brand. So do you think it's safe to still brand that? Like, I don't really give the idea specifically of what it is. No, I do. But like, I just don't want nobody to steal the name and the idea.
Yeah.
So do you think that's safe to still be like, oh yeah, I'm Global Glamour, and then you turn around, the same girl has the same name, but she's not doing the same thing that you're doing. So do you think that's still safe to do? Because I brand it on social media, and I have business cards, I have t-shirts. It's like, you know, I'm trying to do my own thing. But do you think that's the safest way to go?
That's a great question. So here's the thing. When you're building a brand, like you said, it's all about recognition. Somebody said recognition at the very beginning. It's all about recognition. So ideally, you want to be moving towards legalizing your ownership of that name. But in the meantime, use it as much as you possibly can, especially if there isn't another one out there. Because if it comes down to you don't have it legalized, but you see that someone else has popped up and you hire a lawyer, what that lawyer is going to tell you is that you've established that brand well before they did. And whether it's legal on paper or not, they're the ones in the wrong. And you can send them a cease and desist letter.
Okay.
So build it now and then make a very specific plan to get legal. Yeah. Let me take one more question back here. Let's see.
When you get new clients, what's your step-by-step strategy for branding? So, like, where do you start with them, and then what's the ultimate goal at the end for the company?
Good question. So she asked, what is my step-by-step way of working with a client when I'm doing branding for them? So normally I have a consultation call or two with them. I want to find out all about their business. I want to find out what their goals are, what they're doing now. I swear I'm just as much psychologist as I am brand strategist, because you get a lot from people with outside of the things that they actually say. But those are the kind of questions that I ask, like, where are you now? You know, what is the thing that you want to lead with? What do your clients care most about? Because sometimes I don't know their audience. So it's an opportunity for me to dive deeply into a new industry. I have a client who's in plumbing. I don't know anything about plumbing. But I have to find out about plumbing if I want to communicate the way that I need to. So those consultation calls are a large part of that. I have a branding questionnaire that I send them away with. It's just as much a thought tool for them as it is a resource for me. So I ask them questions like what their goals are. I ask them if their brand was a car, what would it be? I ask them who do they aspire to be, like what other brands do they consider to be a goal for them? Which ones do they consider to be competitors? It's not very long, but they're very specific questions. And usually people get clear really quickly about all the things that they know for sure and all the things they have no idea where to start with. So that helps me understand where I can best be used and where I can help them the most. And from that point, after they do that, we have another call, and then we decide where in the matrix of the services that I offer that are going to be the best bang for their buck. Because I'm often working with entrepreneurs. I don't want them to pay for something that they don't need, for one, but I also know that their resources are limited. So it may not necessarily be that they don't need that, they just may need something else first. So then I will submit a proposal to them. Sometimes it's a phased approach, like we'll do this in phase 1, we'll do that in phase 2, and we'll do that in phase 3, and we treat those like individual projects, but it may be, overall, it may be an engagement that lasts for 6 months. So from there, we kind of take it. Or if it's one of my strategic sessions that they purchase, then we kind of get ready for that. I do all the pre-work. We sit in the room for 4 or 8 hours. We do whatever we need to do, and then they get deliverables at the end. So it really just kind of depends. I try to make it as customized as possible. So I have some pre-canned services that I offer, but I'd rather talk to the person and find out exactly what they need before I go in.
You mentioned the challenge of someone else having the same name, and in your case, you used a middle initial. What if you have no middle initial?
If you have no middle initial, I think the main thing is to make sure that you saturate the things that come up online, so that if someone puts in that name, then that your stuff is at the top. So, or there may be differentiators. So, I have a client, Mo Williams. He was a football player, but there's also a basketball player, Mo Williams. So he has to put pro football player on everything, even though he doesn't play anymore, because they'll immediately assume that it's him. Especially, you know, they go one step further and they see the name, and then they go one step further and see athlete, and they just stop. A completely different person. So you want to make sure that your industry or your area of focus is attached to your name as well, because that may be the thing that differentiates you. Okay.
So, hi.
Hi.
Courtney.
Hey, Courtney.
Hi, everybody. So, my question is social media, because social media, I think everyone knows, is the devil.
Do we know that?
I think we all know that. But, so, my problem is I deactivated my Facebook. So, I'm trying to, like, figure out how do I create a Facebook that's not, like, attached to my person. That's not attached to like my personal name, but just the brand that I would like to create.
You set up a Facebook page, not a personal profile, but a Facebook page. So I have a Branding Chicks page that is completely separate from my personal account. And it says in there that I'm the chief chick or whatever, but it doesn't. But my personal account is locked down. So even if they see my name attached to that, they still can't get to anything there. So I try to keep things as separate as possible, because that's part of the strategy of building a brand, is that although it's just me right now, and I build teams with people when I need to, my goal is that I will have a staff of people. So Branding Chicks needs to live outside of me. I'm attached to it right now, but if I decide to sell it or give it to somebody else or whatever, then it needs to be able to stand without me. So that separation is really important. LinkedIn is the same thing. You can set up a business page on LinkedIn without having it necessarily. You can attach it there because it's more professional. But my Twitter account is only Branding Chicks, and I try not to talk about very many personal things there at all. So it's not just that the accounts are separate, but make sure that the content is separate as well. Yeah.
Okay, I have a problem with like as far as my personality, I'm very bubbly, happy, very sweet person. And I do want to be an entrepreneur, but I feel like as a boss, I'm not really taking it serious as I would like to be. And I think a lot of that has to do with my personality. How do I pretty much build a character as to where people will take me seriously as a boss without losing who I am as a person?
That's a good question. So you bring that, so the question was, how does she take her bubbly, fun, caring personality and bring that into her business and still have people take her seriously, right? Clearly I have the same issue. But part of it is that I realize that I don't have to be anyone different. I bring that into everything that I do. I meet a client for the first time, I hug them. And I warn them, but I'm already in at that point. I'm like, I'm a hugger, so all right. This is happening. So if you don't like it, I won't hug you next time, but it's happening. So you just kind of got to bring it in with you. And I think that people will start to respect that and they trust you. One of the quotes that I had up earlier was like, people can know about you and feel like you know what you're doing, but they won't do business with you unless they trust you. And unless you're being authentic, then they won't trust you. So whatever is authentic for you, you bring that in. You find a way to make it professional, but you still bring that in. So, and there's a respect factor there. So there's your personality, but you need to make sure that people respect you for what you know and what you do. And then this is just icing on top of the cake. So they know not to mess with me. Like, I'm a Care Bear, but I'm still a bear. So you just kind of make sure they match up together. Yeah.
So one more question.
One more question? Yeah.
What do you do when your clients don't pay you?
What do I do when my clients don't pay me?
It's called collection aid.
I will usually send an invoice 3 times if they haven't paid me. At that point, I have a really good friend who's a lawyer who I happen to do his branding for. So he'll just send me a letter and I'll put it on his letterhead and I'll send it. And usually they get scared and they pay me. So, yeah. And if they eventually don't pay me, then I write it off on my taxes as a loss. Awesome. I really enjoyed being here with you guys today. I hope you got something from it.